I died at 17. It wasn't heroic, it wasn't beautiful in some tragic way, and it definitely wasn't the kind of death that gets mentioned in history books or even earns a memorable line on a gravestone. It was the kind of death that comes after years of medication, the smell of hospitals, too many tests, and doctors with expressions that were far too careful. I spent most of my life hearing polite variations of two things. We'll do everything we can. And you need to rest. Rest was a funny word. People said it as if my body had ever done anything besides sabotage me full-time. While other boys ran around, fought, fell in love, did stupid things, and swore they'd live forever, I measured victory on a much less glorious scale. A day without too much pain. A decent night's sleep. A test result that didn't get worse. 5 steps without getting dizzy. The luxury of taking a deep breath without feeling like there was glass inside my chest. So yeah, I died young. My last memory of Earth was the white light in the room, the dry taste in my mouth, and the ridiculous feeling of regret for never having done anything real. Nothing big, nothing small. Nothing. I didn't want fame or fortune or dramatic speeches. I just wanted time. Time to walk without help. Time to eat without nausea. Time to feel the wind on my face without thinking about the next dose of medicine. Time to exist like a normal person. I think that's why, when I opened my eyes again, the first thing I did wasn't cry, scream, or question the heavens. It was breathe, deeply, without pain. So deeply that my chest expanded all the way, easy, clean, light. The air went in as if my lungs had finally remembered what they were for. I stayed lying there, staring up at a dark wooden ceiling, and took another breath, and another, just because I could. My body didn't hurt. My body didn't hurt. That realization hit me harder than any metaphysical revelation should hit a minimally rational human being. I sat up so fast I nearly fell off the cot. The room was simple, small. Walls of dried clay, wooden beams, a narrow window letting in the golden light of late afternoon, and the smell of thin soup drifting in from somewhere outside. A rough blanket lay over my skinny legs, small hands resting on the mattress, and when I raised one of them to my face, I found childish cheeks. Silence. I blinked, looked at my hands again, small, looked at my arms, thin but alive in the right way, not fragile like porcelain about to crack, not tired, not sick, just small, a child. Ah! I murmured, in a voice so high and thin I was almost offended. I was in a cabin that looked like it had come straight out of a historical drama. I had a child's hands. I had a child's voice. And considering the overall situation, there was a very real chance I had been reincarnated. I paused for 2 seconds to process that like a well-adjusted person. Then I leaned back against the wall and laughed. Not because it was funny. It was more the kind of laugh that comes out when your mind has already passed the point of absurdity and decides that having a breakdown would take too much energy. Reincarnated. Wonderful. In the first minute of my new life, I came to 2 conclusions. The first, I had really died. The second, by some absurdly generous cosmic miracle, I'd been given a body that actually seemed functional. That second part was what mattered. The rest could wait. I got off the cot carefully, more out of habit than necessity, and took a step. Steady. Another. No dizziness. Another. No stab of pain. No trembling. I crossed the room like an explorer discovering a lost continent. I touched the wall, the low table in the corner, the clay jar, the crooked frame of a religious image I didn't recognize. Then I went to the window and pushed it open. Outside was a simple village spread at the foot of a mountain so vast that for a moment I forgot to breathe again, this time out of respect. The mountain rose like an ancient pillar touching the sky. Thin clouds circled its slopes, and higher up, near the summit, I could make out distant structures clinging to the rock. Curved roofs, narrow walkways, something like pavilions hidden in the mist. It wasn't an ordinary mountain. I didn't know how I knew. I just did. The air outside had a strange freshness to it, almost sweet, as if every gust carried something purer than mere wind. My skin prickled. My chest warmed faintly, and for a fraction of a second, I had the unmistakable sense that invisible threads were running through everything, Sky, stone, trees, earth, like silent currents waiting to be touched. I stood still. Then I said, with all the dignity of a newly reincarnated and emotionally stable person, okay, either I've gone insane in the afterlife, or this really is a cultivation world. Honestly, between the two options, I preferred the second. The first meant I'd finally lost my mind. The second meant there might actually be a real way to live a long time. A very long time. My heart started pounding. Cultivation, sex, techniques, longevity, immortals. On Earth, those things were fantasy. Here, looking at that mountain, feeling that unnatural air, seeing those structures lost in the mist, it felt less like fantasy and more like a terrible idea for impulsive people. In my case, that was perfect. I didn't need to be the hero of the world. I didn't need to conquer the heavens. I didn't need to humiliate young masters, collect enemies, or go leaping into ancient ruins like some lunatic with a death wish. I only needed 3 things: to get strong enough that nobody could kill me easily, to live a long time, and, if possible, to live well. The wooden door creaked open, and a woman walked in carrying a bowl. She froze when she saw me standing. She had a tired but beautiful face, rough working hands, and eyes that immediately grew wet. Shanner. My throat locked up. I didn't know who she was, but my chest knew before my head did. A wave of familiarity passed through me. Confused, warm, painful in a gentle sort of way. Vague, incomplete memories began to rise like reflections underwater. A voice singing softly, hands covering me at night, the smell of rice, a damp cloth on my forehead. My mother, in this life. She set the bowl down on the table and hurried over to me, holding my face in both hands. You're up. Are you feeling better? Are you still dizzy? Feverish? Does your head hurt? I stared at her for a second too long, trying to control the ridiculous knot in my throat. Back on Earth, my mother had cried in silence a lot too. That expression I knew. The difference was that this time I could do something about it. I'm okay, I said, and the sincerity in my own voice nearly broke me. Really? She closed her eyes for a moment, as if thanking every local deity all at once. Then she pulled me into a tight hug. It was strange, new and familiar at the same time, and good, very good. Took me a few seconds to allow myself to hug her back. She pulled away just enough to inspect me again. Suspicious the way any mother who has suffered too much is suspicious of good news. You were so quiet all morning. I thought you were still weak. Weak. The word almost made me laugh. Little did she know that compared to my previous self, I felt like a spirit beast stuffed into the body of an underfed little boy. I think I slept well, I replied, choosing the simplest lie in the world. She seemed satisfied enough not to press. She handed me the bowl, ran a hand through my hair, and started talking about the broth getting cold, about my father not being back from work yet, about how I wasn't to go running around just because I'd woken up feeling better. Running. I could run. The idea was as intoxicating as it was forbidden. I drank the soup in silence, paying attention to every detail of this new life. The simple taste, the warmth going down my throat, the sound of voices in the distance, chickens, wind, wagon wheels, ordinary life. Life! When I finished, my mother went out to fetch water, still glancing back at me over her shoulder as if I might faint out of sheer stubbornness just to spite her. I waited for the door to close, took a deep breath again. Then I felt it. Not in the air this time. Inside me. Something vibrated at the center of my chest, subtle and cold like metal submerged in deep water. A sensation ran through my limbs, climbed the back of my neck, and gathered behind my eyes. A voiceless voice, far too clear to be imagination, echoed in my mind. Vital compatibility confirmed. I froze. The voice continued, calm, clean, and annoyingly indifferent. Celestial longevity system successfully linked. My left eye twitched. Oh no, I whispered. Congratulations, host. A translucent screen appeared in front of me. You have finally obtained a body with statistically decent odds of not dying early. I stared at the words in silence. Then I dragged a hand down my face. Right? I muttered, looking at the glowing emptiness in front of me. So on top of reincarnating, I also got a sarcastic system. Correction. Accurate. I closed my eyes for a second. When I opened them again, the screen was still there. At the top, in luminous characters, was a line that made my heart pound harder than anything else since I woke up. Current life expectancy: 61 years. 61. I had just been born again. And the first thing this world offered me was a number. A deadline. Promise. And maybe, if I played my cards right, a way out. I slowly lifted my gaze to the mountain beyond the window. Clouds spun around the summit as if hiding some ancient truth. For the first time in 2 lives, I had the feeling that the future might not be a narrow hallway ending in a white room. Maybe it could be a long road. Dangerous, irritating, full of power-hungry lunatics, and probably terrible for someone who valued peace. But long. I smiled. All right, I said softly. If this world wants to play, I know how to play too. I looked once more at the glowing line in front of me. 61 years. Not much. Nowhere near enough. But it was already more than I got last time. And I had absolutely no intention of stopping there. I discovered 2 important things on the same day. The first was that I had reincarnated into a cultivation world. The second was that my system had the personality of an underpaid civil servant who hated optimistic people. The screen was still floating in front of me when I decided to test it with the caution of someone who, through traumatic experience, already knew that mysterious things rarely came without predatory fine print. At the top, besides the line showing my life expectancy, there was more information. Name: Linshan. Age: 7 years old. Cultivation: none. Body: immortal golden body, sealed. Techniques: none. Treasures: none. Overall evaluation: rural fragility with promising potential. I stared at it in silence. Rural fragility? Objective description: you manage to be offensive in a very specific way. Efficient communication saves time. I crossed my arms. Considering I was now 7 years old, it made me look like a village elder trapped in the body of a sulking child. And what does immortal golden body sealed mean? The screen flickered lightly. It means the host possesses a supreme physique with extremely high potential, currently restricted to prevent bodily collapse, premature exposure, and stupid death. I paused. I liked the premature exposure part. Natural. It is the first sensible decision associated with the host so far. So far I've literally only breathed, eaten soup, and not died. Exactly. A strong start. I stared at the screen for a few seconds, then laughed through my nose. It wasn't just the fact that there was a system. It was the fact that it seemed specifically designed to irritate me on a personal level. Maybe that was for the best. If I'd been given some kind old spirit calling me the chosen one of the heavens, there was a real chance I would have developed an ego. A sarcastic system, on the other hand, seemed much more compatible with a long life. Nothing helps survival quite like being constantly reminded that the universe does not think you're special. Except, apparently, for the small detail of the immortal golden body. I looked back at the most important line of all. Current life expectancy: 61 years. 61. I knew, rationally, that for a 7-year-old child born in a poor village, that might not even be a bad number. Even so, my first instinct was to take it personally. 61 years was better than 17. But it was still too little. Way too little. Especially in a world where, if I was right, there were cultivators who could live for centuries, maybe even millennia. How do I increase it? The answer came immediately. Cultivation. Body strengthening. Rare resources. Specific techniques. Special opportunities. System rewards. My chest warmed. So it can go up by a lot? If the host avoids dying like an idiot, yes. You really don't have much faith in me. Based on interdimensional statistics, the human species requires caution. Fair. I walked back to the window and stared at the mountain. The late afternoon light had softened, tinting the distant structures with a golden glow that made everything look too ancient to be human. There was a sect up there. I didn't know its name, its strength, its history, or the level of its disciples, but I knew one thing. If cultivation existed in this world, then my path was on that mountain. Not out of empty ambition, not out of hunger for glory, out of fear, out of desire, out of a quiet, deep hunger to keep existing. I had died young once. I had no intention of repeating the experience just because fate had decided to give me a second chance in a place full of people who probably dueled over poorly worded insults. What do I need to do first? I asked. The screen rearranged itself. Initial mission unlocked. Objective: sense the chi of heaven and earth for the first time. Time limit: 3 days. Reward: plus 3 years of life expectancy. Basic breathing technique of Serene Valley. Failure: no penalty. Additional comment: even for the host, breathing has already shown encouraging results. I closed my eyes. I'm going to end up hating you. Intense relationships often begin this way. Was that a joke? No, that was an observation. I didn't know whether to laugh or go find a wall to bang my head against. Since I had finally acquired a functional head, I decided to preserve the asset. The door opened again before I could investigate further. The screen vanished instantly. Good. Excellent. At least the system understood the value of not making me look like a lunatic talking to empty air. My father walked in carrying a bundle of firewood on his back. He was a lean man, sun-darkened, with shoulders marked by years of hard labor. There was visible exhaustion in the way he moved, but his eyes lit up when he saw me standing by the window. Shen. He didn't rush over to hug me like my mother had. He just set the firewood down slowly beside the door, wiped his hands on his clothes, and watched me for a moment as if confirming with his own eyes that I was still in one piece. Your mother said you were feeling better. I really am, I answered. My voice came out steadier this time. I still found that childish tone strange, but I was starting to accept that it was mine. My father nodded once, serious in the way simple men sometimes are when they feel too much to say at all. He walked over and rested a large hand on my head. Good. That was all. But the light pressure of that hand said much more. In this world, I hadn't been born alone. I had a family. Poor, tired, probably burdened by hardships I didn't even understand yet, but mine. And that realization moved me more than I would have liked to admit. I had spent my entire previous life being protected by people who couldn't save me. My parents had carried a weight they were never able to put down, and I could do nothing but watch while time chewed away at all of us little by little. Now it was different. This time I had a body that worked. This time there was a real chance I could become strong. And if I became strong, maybe I could protect someone instead of only being protected. The thought settled quietly inside me, heavy and discreet. I didn't need to say it out loud yet. We had dinner together. A simple soup, vegetables, some rice that was a little too hard, and a comfortable silence between short lines of conversation. I found out that this family also called me Shenner, that the harvest that year had been poor, that there were rumors of recruitment on the mountain once winter ended, and that I was apparently known in the village for being born handsome and getting sick often. I accepted the handsome part with exemplary humility. The getting sick often part annoyed me immediately. I can help tomorrow, I said in the middle of the meal. My mother looked up. Help with what? Anything. The two of them looked at me as if I had announced my intention to head off alone and hunt tigers. You're still recovering, my mother said. I just lay around for a long time. I'm not broken. My father let out a short sound, something between a laugh and a sigh. Your temperament is better. Is that a compliment? I'm still deciding. I made an offended face, which drew a small smile from my mother. Good. Useful. If I was going to stay in this world for a long time, and I intended to, then I'd better learn to use charm before I had to use force. After the meal, night truly fell. The village sank into that darkness full of little sounds. Insects, wind passing between the houses, distant voices gradually swallowed by the night. I lay down on the cot, but sleep felt wasteful. Not when there was a mission with a 3-day deadline and, more importantly, a reward of 3 years. 3 years. On Earth, 3 years would have been an absurd blessing. Here, they were still sacred. I waited for my parents to fall asleep. They slept on the other side of the room, separated by a simple curtain and the honest poverty of people who couldn't afford privacy. When their breathing became deep and steady, I slowly sat up. Moonlight cast a silver glow through the window. And now, I whispered inwardly, how do I feel this so-called chi? The screen appeared discreetly, almost transparent. To sit upright, calm your breathing, perceive the body, then perceive what lies beyond the body. Very poetic, not very practical. Cultivation requires sensitivity, not an assembly manual for a chair. I took a deep breath. Right? Sensitivity. I could do that. Straight back, legs crossed, hands on my knees. The air moved in and out slowly. First came the sounds of the night, then the weight of my own body, the rough touch of fabric against skin, the faint cold brushing my face. Little by little, I tried to push my perception farther. First, nothing. Just silence, breathing, and a growing stab of irritation. 5 minutes later, I was still there, disciplined. 10 minutes later, still nothing. 15 minutes later, I began to suspect the system might be amusing itself at my expense. I'm not feeling anything, I complained mentally. The host spent 7 years occupying the body without formal training. Be patient. Technically, I've been in this body for less than a day. Technically, complaining still does not help. I breathed in slowly through my nose so I wouldn't say anything undignified to a spiritual interface. I kept going. Time passed, and then little by little my mind began to quiet in a way I had never known before. It wasn't like falling asleep. It was like sinking into clear, transparent water without losing my sense of self. The sounds grew more distant. The air became sharper. The whole world seemed bigger on the inside than it looked from the outside. Without thinking, I guided my breathing toward that diffuse presence. Not pulling hard, not demanding, just inviting. The mist responded. A thread of cold slipped in through the top of my head. Another came in with my breath. A third brushed my arms as if testing the path. When they reached the center of my body, a shiver ran through me from the back of my neck to my ankles. It didn't hurt. It was better than that. It was as if every part of me were being washed from the inside. As if my body were finally receiving something it had been waiting for my entire life. Without noticing, I smiled. Then I almost lost control when the energy suddenly thickened, spinning in my abdomen in a much stronger flow than I had expected. One eye opened. Hey! Remain calm. There's something coming in way too fast. Your immortal golden body possesses abnormal affinity with spiritual energy. This is considered an advantage. An advantage that feels like it's about to blow me up. Dramatic. You've clearly never exploded. Incorrect. I stopped for a second. What? Restricted information. I hate you. But I took a deep breath and focused again. Instead of fighting the flow, I tried to organize it. Guided in short, gentle circles at the center of my body, as if I were teaching water how to run without overflowing. It worked. Little by little, the turbulence became steadier. The energy kept entering, but now at a manageable pace. I could feel it gathering, refining something in me, awakening a vitality so pure that it almost hurt to remember my previous life. That was when the screen flashed. Mission completed. Reward granted. Plus 3 years of life expectancy. Reward granted. Basic breathing technique of Serene Valley. My chest tightened. I couldn't even look at the technique first. I went straight to the most important line. Current life expectancy. 64 years. 64. 3 years. Earned in a single night. I sat motionless, staring at that number as if it might disappear at any moment. On Earth, I had learned early that time was cruel, inflexible, indifferent. It didn't negotiate, it didn't care, and it never took anything back. But now I could tear more out of it. Slowly, maybe, with effort, risk, and strategy. But I could. I let out a breath, and only then did I realize my eyes were burning. Ridiculous. Absolutely ridiculous to cry over 3 numbers. And yet, there in the dark, 7 years old, In a new and living body, I let the emotion pass through me without fighting it, just for a moment. Then I wiped my face with my sleeve, recovered as much dignity as possible, and examined the new technique. Basic breathing technique of Serene Valley. Description: introductory technique for chi absorption and refinement. Stable rhythm, low risk, highly compatible with solid foundations and cautious profiles. Evaluation: finally something suited to the host's excessively prudent personality. I'm going to take you apart piece by piece once I figure out where you live. Emotionally stable host detected. I ignored it. A safe, stable technique suited for solid foundations. Perfect. Exactly the kind of thing I wanted. No suicidal methods promising lightning-fast progress in exchange for dying before 30. I had already lived a version of that. I didn't need to repeat it with special effects. I kept cultivating until the sky started to brighten. By the time the first bluish tones appeared in the window, my whole body felt more awake, lighter, sharper. It wasn't some explosive breakthrough. It was better than that. Felt like I was starting the right way. I lay back down on the cot shortly before my mother woke up. When she called me, I pretended to open my eyes like an innocent, well-rested child, which was an excellent performance on my part. I got up, washed my face in a basin of cold water, and stepped outside for the first time in the morning light. The village was even simpler up close. Mud and wood houses, crooked fences, packed dirt, smoke rising from improvised stoves, children running after chickens with an amount of energy I considered aggressively optimistic for that hour. And above all, the mountain. It dominated everything. By daylight, it was even more impressive. Dark green at the base, rocky higher up, wrapped in bands of mist that seemed to hide secret paths. The distant rooftops high above gleamed in the sunlight as if they belonged to another world. Maybe they really did. "Shunner!" a voice called from the side. I turned and saw a girl around my age, maybe a little younger, with 2 braids, bright eyes, and an openly curious expression. She was holding a basket almost bigger than her torso and staring at me as if I had come back from the dead, which technically was a fair summary. "Weren't you sick?" she asked, walking over without ceremony. I still find it impressive how this village turned my health into a matter of public interest. She frowned. "What?" "Nothing. I'm better." She looked me up and down and narrowed her eyes. "You're weird." "Thank you." That wasn't a compliment. I accepted it as one. She huffed, as if I had failed to meet some invisible expectation, and pointed at the mountain. "My brother said people from the sect are coming down in a few months. Maybe to choose children." My heart gave a harder beat, but I kept my face neutral. "Really?" "Yeah. He also said nobody from here has a chance, so I hope he falls into a lake." I smiled. "That's a very pure wish." She lifted her chin. "I'm very pure." I looked at the basket, the troublemaker face, and the offensively confident tone. "Without a doubt." She gave me a suspicious look, as if she could tell I was laughing at her on the inside. The problem was, I actually was. Before she could reply, a faint wave of heat passed over my skin. The mountain, or rather, something coming from it. Instinctively, I looked up. High above, between the mist, there was a brief flash, almost imperceptible, as if some formation or artifact had pulsed for a second. The sensation made the chi around me vibrate in response. My system appeared with a single line. "New opportunity detected." I went still. The girl beside me noticed my silence. "What is it?" I was still looking up. The flash had already vanished. But something told me, with the dangerous calm of premonitions that change destinies, that the mountain had just looked back. I don't like omens. Actually, that's not entirely true. I do like omens, as long as they're about good things, involve longevity, moderate wealth, steady cultivation, and ideally no concrete chance of a horrible death. The problem was that the flash on the mountain had exactly the energy of an important event. And important events, in my extremely limited yet emotionally well-qualified experience, rarely came alone. They usually brought curious people, ambitious people, impulsive people, and, if the universe was feeling particularly inspired, some kind of trouble with legs. I kept looking up for a few more seconds. The glow was already gone. The mist had gone back to covering everything with that irritating dignity sacred places have when they know more than you do. Beside me, the girl with the braids tilted her head. Shanner. I looked away from the mountain and met her expression. Curious, suspicious, a little bossy, considering the size of the basket she was carrying, also dangerously used to ordering around people her own size. "What was that?" she asked. "You looked like you heard a ghost." "This village really doesn't respect me very much," I said. "First my health becomes public business, and now people assume I get scared for free." She rolled her eyes. "You were standing there staring at the mountain like an old man, and you talk like an irritated grandmother." "I do not. You just did." She wrinkled her nose at me, offended with the depth of someone who clearly had not yet developed arguments better than facial expressions and pure resentment. "Honestly, admirable. Are you going to help me or keep being weird?" she asked, nudging the basket a little in my direction. I looked at the basket, then at her. "Your social approach is aggressive. And does it work?" I thought for half a second. "Unfortunately, yes." I grabbed one of the handles. It was heavier than I would have liked to admit, but lighter than I had feared. Another small victory for my new body. Less than 2 days ago, I would have considered lifting a basket like this a life goal. Now I merely considered complaining in silence and maintaining my dignity. We started walking through the village. The ground was packed dirt, still damp in places from the morning mist. Thin smoke rose from stoves, chickens crossed the road as if they were local authorities, and people were starting the day with that universal expression of those who had accepted living, but still hadn't entirely forgiven mourning for existing. The mountains still loomed above everything. Even as I walked and pretended to focus on humble, socially harmless tasks, part of me kept feeling a faint echo of that flash. Not a vision, not exactly. More like a sensation, as if something up there had noticed my existence. Which was terrible news. I was barely 7 years old. The maximum amount of supernatural attention I wanted at that point was from my system, and that only because it had already come built into the package. Any additional entity taking an interest in me sounded statistically unsafe. "Are you really going to stay quiet?" the girl asked. I was enjoying the silence. "What silence?" "You were ignoring me." "Exactly. A very nice silence." She gave me a look of pure moral outrage. "You really are weird today. I think almost dying improves your sense of priorities." She stopped walking. I stopped too. Maybe I shouldn't have chosen that phrasing. Her expression changed quickly. The teasing vanished, and in its place came something smaller, more uncertain. She hesitated. "I thought you were going to get sick again." There it was. That was the problem with people. They had this irritating habit of feeling things. I looked at her more carefully. She had the same lively eyes as before, but now there was a shy discomfort in the way she held the basket, as if she regretted sounding rude too early. I let out a silent sigh. "So did I," I replied, and this time there was no irony in it. "But I'm okay now." She stared at me for a moment, as if testing the sentence. "Really? Really? We started walking again. "That was a very suspicious I commented. "It's because you look prettier when you're healthy, so it's suspicious." I slowly turned my head to look at her. That was an extremely badly phrased compliment. She froze for half a second, only then realizing what she had said. Her ears turned red. "Excellent. Very educational." "I didn't mean it like that," she shot back, offended by her own tactical failure. "I just meant that you looked half dead before." "Wow, that was much better. You're annoying, and you have a real talent for digging verbal holes." She huffed so hard a nearby chicken backed away, perhaps recognizing a territorial rival. I smiled discreetly. "Very good." That confirmed 2 things. First, my natural charm had survived reincarnation. Second, I definitely needed to learn to use it responsibly, or in the long run my life expectancy might be threatened by romantic resentment before I ever got to real enemies. The system appeared at the edge of my vision without warning. Observation. The host has developed romantic self-confidence far too early. I kept walking as if I hadn't read anything. Additional correction. A 7-year-old should not look so pleased with himself. Go away, I muttered under my breath. The girl turned her head. What? Nothing. I was talking to myself. She looked at me as if that confirmed an old theory. I knew you were being weird. Wonderful. We kept going until we reached the edge of a small cultivated plot, where an older woman accepted the basket with gratitude. Apparently, I had just participated in a communal chore without fully understanding how I had been recruited. That was concerning. If I wasn't careful, social life was going to swallow me whole before the sect ever got the chance. While the woman thanked us, I took the opportunity to observe the village more closely. It was poor, yes, but it had a kind of resilient warmth. The houses were simple, the tools patched over, the clothes worn thin from use, but there was something dignified about the routine there. Work, fatigue, small favors, people who knew each other by name and by hardship. In my past life, I had spent a lot of time looking at the world through a window. Now I was inside it. The feeling was far too good for me not to distrust it. Shunner! A male voice called from the other side of the path. A slightly older boy came running over, skinny, hair tied up carelessly, and with enough energy to qualify as an environmental hazard. I recognized his face through vague memories from this life. The neighbor's son, local specialist in getting into places he shouldn't, and acting like that was a virtue. He stopped in front of me with a wide grin. So you didn't die. I was silent for a moment. This village has a fascinating sense of verbal delicacy. The boy blinked. The girl with the braids crossed her arms. I said that earlier. No, you were worse, I replied. She looked annoyed that I was correct. The boy poked my arm. Are you really okay? I'm starting to regret looking healthy. It's attracting too many people. He laughed, with absolutely no respect for the depth of my suffering. Great, then come with us. No, I haven't even said where. That makes refusing easier. The girl with the braids, traitor that she was, cut in. He's coming. You do not have decision-making power over my life. Yes, I do. You're bored. I value my boredom. The boy had already grabbed my wrist. Come on, just to the creek near the forest. My brother said he saw a glowing stone there yesterday. A glowing stone. A creek. Near the forest. 3 expressions that, in a cultivation world, sounded like a formal invitation to trouble. I pulled my arm back. No. Oh, come on. The boy insisted. What if it's something from the mountain? The girl lifted her chin, interested. What if it is? I closed my eyes for a second. This was how tragedies began. Not with ancient demons descending from the sky, but with idiot children saying, what if? With shining eyes. If it's something from the mountain, I said with heroic patience, then it is exactly the kind of thing weak, young people with absolutely no survival ability should avoid. They both looked at me. The boy reacted first. You talk really weird when you're trying to sound smart. That's because I am smart. No, you sound old. The girl nodded. An old, pretty, annoying man. The 3 of us went silent. She blinked. I raised an eyebrow. The boy's eyes widened. Then he slowly turned toward her with the expression of someone who had just watched a pot explode in somebody else's kitchen. She froze for a second, then pointed at me with desperate indignation. This is his fault. Impressive, I said. You somehow made it worse again. Shut up. The boy started laughing so hard he had to brace himself on his knees. The girl turned red all the way to her neck and gave me a look that promised administrative violence. I, on the other hand, was almost feeling sorry for her. Almost. The system appeared again. Observation. The village presents promising conditions for early romantic misunderstandings. Disappear, I thought. Request denied in spirit. Ignoring my personal hell, the boy caught his breath and pointed toward the trail leading to the creek. Come on before someone else gets the glowing stone. Excellent argument, I said. Irrational urgency always improves bad decisions. But to my displeasure, curiosity had already entered the scene. It was prudent, responsible, perfectly justified curiosity, and in no way comparable to the recklessness of my companions. I didn't want adventure. I wanted information. If there was any connection between the flash on the mountain and something appearing near the village, it would be stupid to ignore it completely. As long as I went, looked, and retreated at the first sign of mortal danger, it still counted as intelligent caution. I think. I'm only going to look, I said. If I sense anything strange, we leave. The boy raised his fist in celebration. The girl smiled, far too satisfied. Then move it, pretty old man. I looked at her. You've really decided to make that a habit? She pretended not to hear me and walked ahead. We took the narrow trail between low shrubs, damp stones, and trees marking the beginning of the forest. The mountain hung above us, immense, and the farther we moved from the center of the village, the more the air changed. It became colder, cleaner, more charged. I felt it before I saw anything. The chi in that area was a little denser than near the houses. Nothing drastic, but enough for my body to react slightly. A soft vibration beneath my skin. A pleasant echo in the center of my chest. My immortal golden body seemed to like that place. That alone made me suspicious. Do you feel that? I asked without thinking. The boy looked back over his shoulder. What? The air. It feels normal. The girl looked confused too. It smells like wet plants. That's all, right? So I was probably the only one noticing it. Or I was becoming dramatically sensitive to chi at a speed I found uncomfortable. The system flashed. Confirmation. Spiritual sensitivity above average. Additional confirmation. The host's companions are spiritually obtuse. That was cruel. Not incorrect, but cruel. We kept going until we heard the sound of the creek. The water ran between pale stones and twisted roots, shining under the morning light. The place was beautiful in a dangerous sort of way. Too quiet, too clean. Thin mist hovered over the surface in places, and the leaves around it seemed greener than the rest of the forest. Then I saw it. Near a larger rock, partially hidden among moss and shallow water, there was a faint glow. It wasn't big, maybe the size of a fingernail, but it pulsed. A delicate bluish light, almost breathing. The boy grinned triumphantly. I knew it. I, on the other hand, stopped walking. Every instinct in me did the same. It wasn't pure fear. It was something more precise. That little glowing thing contained chi. Not much, but real. The girl took a step forward. It's pretty. Don't touch it, I said immediately. She turned to look at me. Why? Because mysterious glowing things in creeks near spiritual mountains belong to the universal category of maybe wonderful, maybe lethal. Because anything tied to cultivation could attract trouble. Because I had only just regained the chance to live, and I did not intend to gamble that on the judgment of two socially unsupervised children. Because I said so. The boy made a face. That's not an explanation. It's enough. He was about to argue, but at that moment the bluish light pulsed more strongly. The water around it trembled. The air turned cold all at once. My heart gave one heavy beat. The system appeared with a short notification. Low-level spiritual object detected. Provisional name. Spiritual dew fragment. Current risk. Low. Observation. Low risk does not include idiotic decisions by the host or third parties. At least it knew how to prioritize. The girl took another step closer. I stretched an arm out in front of her without taking my eyes off the fragment. I said, don't touch it. This time, my voice came out different. Firmer. She froze. The boy noticed too. The glow intensified again, and a thin thread of light peeled away from the fragment's surface, rising into the air like liquid smoke. On the opposite bank of the creek, the bushes moved. All of us turned our heads at the same time. Silence. Then a short sound of leaves being pushed aside. Something emerged from the undergrowth. It was small, the size of a large cat, with a slender body, gray-white fur, and very pale eyes. It looked like some stretched-out cross between a weasel and a fox, much too beautiful to be trustworthy. The animal hopped onto a rock near the water and stared directly at the glowing fragment. Then it looked at me. I didn't like that even a little. spiritual beasts. Of course, the world really didn't know how to do anything in moderation. The girl took a step back and bumped into my arm. What is that? Something that strongly reinforces my argument that we should have stayed home. The boy swallowed hard. Is it going to attack? The beast tilted its head, as if evaluating us. The chi around it was clearer now. Not much stronger than mine, probably, but steadier. Wilder. More used to existing. The creature let out a low sound, half song, half warning. The fragment in the creek glowed in response. Of course. So that was it. It wanted the glowing thing. We were here too. Therefore, the universe had prepared a very low-budget standoff specifically to annoy me in Chapter 3 of my new life. I took a deep breath. I didn't want to fight. I didn't want to run in a panic. I wanted to leave with as much dignity as possible, everyone alive, and, if the world was being exceptionally cooperative, maybe even with the spiritual resource. The problem was that the beast kept looking at me as if it knew that among the 3 children present, I was the only one who actually understood that the thing had value. The system appeared again. Optional mission unlocked. Objective: obtain the spiritual dew fragment. Reward: plus 2 years of life expectancy. Note: fleeing remains an option. A humiliating option, but statistically valid. My eye almost twitched. 2 years. 2. I looked at the fragment glowing in the shallow water. Then at the small spiritual beast on the rock. Then at the 2 children behind me, already too nervous to pretend bravery. I let the air out slowly. Great. It seemed the mountain hadn't just answered. It had started the conversation. The difference between courage and stupidity is usually decided after someone bleeds. Since I had no particular interest in finding out where that line was using my own body, I stayed motionless on the creek bank, watching the small spiritual beast on the other side of the water the way one watches a particularly malicious bureaucratic problem. It was pretty. That only made everything worse. Pretty creatures in cultivation worlds were rarely just pretty. They usually came with venom, speed, larger relatives, or some kind of poetic misfortune reserved for the first idiot foolish enough to think how cute. Beside me, Mu Xiaoyan was breathing in short bursts, trying not to show that she was scared. The village boy, whom I was beginning to suspect had been placed in this world exclusively to test my patience, had also lost most of his enthusiasm. Good. At last, a little collective clarity. The blue fragment in the creek pulsed again. The small spiritual beast tilted its head slightly, first toward it, then toward me. Its pale eyes were far too clear. They didn't have the confusion of ordinary animals. There was intent there. Evaluation, calculation. I hated that immediately because calculation was my territory. Nobody move, I said quietly. I wasn't planning to move, the boy whispered, without taking his eyes off the creature. Excellent. Your moral development moves me. Mu Xiaoyan lightly jabbed me in the arm without looking away from the beast. Do you always get annoying when you're nervous? No. Sometimes I get brilliant too. Under normal circumstances, she would have snapped back. Since she didn't, I concluded she was genuinely scared. That reduced my desire to provoke a clever reply and greatly increased my desire to get us out of there without either of them becoming a low-level spiritual beast's breakfast. The system appeared at the edge of my vision. Suggestion: the host may embrace strategic humiliation and retreat. Additional observation: 2 years of life expectancy are still 2 years. I closed one eye for a second. That was exactly why I didn't like negotiating with myself when longevity rewards were involved. My rational side wanted to leave with everyone alive. The part of me traumatized by my past life was looking at those 2 years the way a drowning man looks at dry land. 2 years. In an ordinary life, maybe that wouldn't seem like much. In mine, it was practically a cosmic insult. Too small to solve the problem. Too valuable to ignore. The beast let out another low sound. The fragment answered with a brighter glow. Right. So this was the situation. The spiritual object attracted the creature. The creature probably already considered it its own. We were here. I had 2 children behind me, and a mocking system offering me longevity in exchange for a potentially bad decision. In short, the morning was going terribly. Shen, Mu Xiaoyan whispered. What do we do? Excellent question. Terrible moment to remember that I was 7 years old and had zero real experience with spiritual beasts outside of useless reading from my previous life and a concerning amount of freshly awakened instinct. But my body could feel the creature's chi. Weak but stable. Wild, yes, but not overwhelming. The risk the system had labeled low made sense, as long as nobody decided to act like a lunatic. The problem was that half the group consisted of children who had come looking for a glowing stone. The statistics were against me. First, I said, keeping my voice calm, you two take 3 steps back. And you? The boy asked. I'll step back after. That sounds like a lie. Congratulations. You're learning how to listen to me properly. He made a face but obeyed. Mu Xiaoyan did too. Good. A modest miracle but a useful one. The beast followed their movement with only its eyes. When I didn't move, its attention returned to me. Of course, because the universe has an impeccable instinct for identifying the person least interested in being the protagonist and shoving him to the front anyway. Slowly, very slowly, I shifted my body a little to the side, trying to change my angle relative to the fragment. The creature reacted almost at once. Its paws adjusted on the rock, its body lowered slightly, and its gaze sharpened. Fast. Very fast. Not impossible to deal with, maybe, but absolutely too fast for my taste. The system reappeared. Preliminary analysis. Low-level spiritual beast. Affinity with moisture and smooth chi flow. Probable weakness. Aversion to sudden disturbances in the flow of water. Ah! Now that was civilized information. I looked at the creek. The water ran between pale stones, making little curves and eddies where the current struck harder. The fragment was lodged in a shallow patch, between moss and a larger rock. Pretty, delicate, and extremely inconvenient. Sudden disturbances in the flow of water. Xiaoyan, I murmured. What? Do you have a stone in your hand? She looked at me as if I had gone insane at the worst possible moment. No. Get one. Now? No, next week. Of course now. She made an offended face, but slowly crouched and picked up a small stone from the ground. What about me? The boy asked, in a tone that suggested criminal enthusiasm. You do exactly the opposite of whatever your heart tells you. That is not a clear instruction. Then stay quiet. It's safer. He looked almost insulted, which I considered a good sign. Offended people talk less. I looked back at the beast. When I say so, throw the stone into the water. Far from the fragment. More to the left. Mu Xiaoyan tightened her grip on the stone. And that's going to work? I have no idea. But it sounds smart, so let's pretend to be confident. That doesn't help. It's helping me. The creature took 1 step on the rock. Its body looked like a line of tension about to snap. Without wasting time, I slowly crouched and picked up another stone for myself. The plan, if it deserved that name, was simple. Disrupt the flow, distract the beast for an instant, grab the fragment, and get out before nature decided to charge an imprudence fee. It was a bad plan. But it was a bad plan with a clear objective, which already put it above a large portion of human decisions. Now, I whispered. Mu Xiaoyan threw the stone. To her credit, it was a good throw. The stone hit the water to the left of the fragment, sending up a higher splash and breaking the smooth current for an instant. The beast reacted immediately, turned toward the sound just for a second, but a full second. I threw my own stone right after, harder, hitting a larger rock behind the shallow current. The impact sent cold water spraying in an arc and scattered glittering droplets through the air. The creature jumped back in a short leap. Shun! The boy whispered, half impressed, half panicked. I was already moving. I stepped into the shallow water in a single stride, ignored the icy shock climbing up my legs, and reached for the fragment. The instant my fingers touched the bluish light, I felt a cold current pass through my skin and run up my arm like a liquid thread of chi. It was pure, delicate, alive. It was also exactly the kind of sensation that got people killed early out of greed. I grabbed the fragment. The spiritual beast let out a sharp cry and leaped. My only advantage was that I had already expected that. Instead of retreating backward, I threw myself sideways, using the slick water to slide in a movement that was ugly, undignified, and, at that moment, magnificently efficient. The creature passed through where I had been an instant earlier and landed in the current, splashing water everywhere. "Run!" I shouted. This time I didn't need to say it twice. The two of them bolted up the trail with an obedience that almost made me respect them. Almost. I hauled myself out of the water with the fragment in hand and ran after them, hearing the beast recover itself in the creek behind us. The system appeared right in the middle of the chaos. "Congratulations! The host has obtained the spiritual dew fragment in a tactically acceptable and aesthetically regrettable manner." "Go to hell!" I growled through my teeth as I ran. Behind me, the sound of the creature racing along the bank got closer. Fast indeed. The narrow trail between the trees turned into a succession of roots, damp stones, and short breath. The boy was in front, quick in the very specific style of panic-driven survival. Mu Xiaoyan was right behind him. I was last, which put me exactly where I did not want to be. I looked over my shoulder. The little beast was following us in low, rapid bounds, its body barely touching the ground long enough to be insulted by gravity. His pale eyes were locked on my closed hand. So it wasn't about us. It was about the fragment. Great. I was now the proud official bearer of a glowing problem. "Shen!" Mu Xiaoyan turned her head while running. "It's still coming." I noticed. The whole chase is very hard to miss. The boy nearly tripped over a root, regained his balance through sheer desperation, and kept going. "Throw that thing away." I seriously considered the idea for half a second. 2 years of life. 2. No, not after touching it. Existential greed. 1. "Keep running," I shouted. "That doesn't solve anything," Mu Xiaoyan shot back. "It solves things partially if nobody dies." The trail started sloping down toward a more open area, where large stones were scattered among low bamboo and older trees. The air there was even fresher, and the fragment's chi seemed to pulse in my palm, as if it recognized the world around it. Terrible time for a spiritual object to feel at home. The beast leaped again, closer this time. I heard the sound before I felt the wind. I dropped my body by reflex, and something gray-white passed over my shoulder. The creature landed lightly and silently in front of me, blocking the trail. I stopped abruptly. The other two stopped too. Now we were all panting, with the beast between us and the easiest way out. Wonderful. It lowered its body, ready to spring again. Its fur was wet from the creek in places, and its pale eyes looked even colder now. Small, pretty, insufferably efficient. "It looks angrier now," the boy whispered. "Your analytical abilities bloom under pressure," I replied. My options were limited. Try to run around it? Maybe that would work. Maybe it would tear my leg open first. Throw the fragment far away? Maybe that would buy us time to escape. Maybe it would come back later. Maybe I'd lose 2 years and still walk away injured. Fight? Ugly word. Far too ugly for a morning like this. But I still had one thing in my favor. Not strength. Not technique. Chi. Very little, but no longer zero. And I had spent the night feeling how flow moved. How it entered. How it circulated. How it reacted. If the beast had an aversion to sudden disturbances in water, maybe I didn't need to beat it. Maybe I just needed to annoy it enough. There was a narrow streamlet running beside the trail, fed by the creek itself. Small but present. Enough water to try something. The system appeared. Tactical suggestion. Infiltrate a small portion of chi into the water flow and break the natural smoothness of the movement. Chance of success. Uncertain. Chance of looking ridiculous. High. You really do enjoy this at my expense. Moderately. I took a deep breath. Right. No dignity then. I held the fragment in my left hand and, with my right, bent slightly toward the thin stream of water running between the stones. There was no technique. No manual. Just sensation. Intention. The still clumsy push of the newly awakened chi inside me. I pushed. Nothing. The beast narrowed its eyes. Excellent. I tried again, this time remembering the night before. The way the energy circulated when I didn't fight it, the way it responded better to calm than force. Then I felt it. A tiny thread of chi ran down my arm and touched the water. It was almost nothing, but enough. The smooth little stream suddenly trembled, as if a wrong note had been played in the body of the creek. The water shivered, lost its softness for an instant, and splashed irregularly against the stones. The beast reacted instantly. It stepped back half a pace. His pale eyes tightened. It worked. It actually worked. My heart pounded, not from fear this time, but from that very specific kind of euphoria that only appears when a bad plan unexpectedly stops being completely bad. Xiaoyan, I said, without taking my eyes off the creature. When I count to 3, you and him run to the right. And you? She asked, for the second time that morning. I felt a deep moral exhaustion. I'm starting to find it offensive how everyone keeps asking that, as if I have suicidal hobbies. Shen, I'll be right behind you. She didn't believe me. The boy didn't either. Honestly, I was still deciding. The beast moved again, but more cautiously now. I disturbed the water again with the little chi I could push, and it hesitated. Not out of absolute fear, just irritation, loss of rhythm, that tiny fraction of discomfort that creates an opening to flee. That was all I needed. 1. The two of them tensed. The creature lowered its body. 2. My arm was starting to ache. I had enough chi to be inconvenient, not enough to sustain genius. 3. Mu Xiaoyan grabbed the boy by the sleeve before he could do anything heroic and of doubtful usefulness. The two of them shot off to the right, skirting around the larger rocks. The beast moved. I shoved all my chi at once. The water jerked, splashed crookedly, and smacked against the stones with a dry sound. The creature froze for an instant, irritated, and that instant was enough for me to run after them. This time I didn't look back. The trail rose again, and in the distance I could already see the break in the vegetation that led back toward the area near the village. Just seeing a familiar path filled me with an absolutely pathetic amount of joy. Never underestimate the emotional value of a successful escape. We ran until the first signs of crooked fences, harder packed ground, and distant cooking smoke came into view. Only then did we stop, the three of us nearly doubled over, dragging in air as if the world itself had charged rent for every breath. I looked back. Nothing. The trail was quiet. The beast had not followed us that far. I stayed silent for a few seconds, just listening to my heart pound. Then I slowly opened my hand. The spiritual dew fragment was still there, giving off a soft blue glow over my wet palm. Alive. Beautiful. Mine. The system appeared with offensively restrained enthusiasm. Optional mission completed. Reward granted. Plus 2 years of life expectancy. Another line appeared beneath it. Current life expectancy. 66 years. 66. I stared at the number without saying anything. 66. It wasn't much compared to what I wanted. Not yet, but it was more. Truly more. More time torn out of the world with my own wet hands, my questionable plans, and my absolute refusal to accept a short life as inevitable destiny. I felt a ridiculous urge to laugh. Then Mu Xiaoyan grabbed my arm. You're bleeding. I blinked, coming out of the trance. On my right forearm were 3 thin, shallow, nearly parallel marks. I hadn't even felt them in the heat of the escape. The beast had probably clipped me in one of its leaps near the water. The boy went pale. It hit you. Technically, I said, looking at the scratches. This barely counts as a respectable attempt. Mu Xiaoyan shot me a look far too angry for someone who was clearly more scared than furious. Are you an idiot? That question is becoming far too frequent for my taste. You went into the creek. You grabbed the thing. You ran last. You stayed behind. Yes, I was present for all of those events. Thank you for the summary. She squeezed my arm even tighter before realizing what she was doing and letting go at once, as if the contact irritated her too. I'm serious. I stopped smiling, because underneath the anger, her voice was shaking. I looked at her properly. Mu Xiaoyan was pale, her eyes too wide, her braids slightly loose from the run. The boy looked rattled too, but hid it better behind pure astonishment. I let out a slow breath. "I know," I answered, quieter. "I'm fine." She opened her mouth to argue, but I lifted the hand holding the glowing fragment in my palm. Both of them froze. The boy spoke first. Was that worth it?" I looked at the bluish light, then at the scratches, then at the invisible line in my mind that now said 66 years. I smiled, tired. "You have no idea." The system, of course, didn't miss the chance. Observation. The host is developing a concerning emotional attachment to his own life expectancy. I answered in my mind with all the dignity I had left. "Of course I am. That's what I came back for." In the distance, the mountain rose above the mist as if it bore no responsibility whatsoever for the chain of bad decisions it inspired. I knew two things. The first was that I needed to hide the fragment immediately. The second was that this was still far from over. Because in a cultivation world, spiritual resources never came alone. They came with consequences. And apparently, I had just bought my first ones.